They say a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And for businesses looking to tackle the issues surrounding diversity, equity and inclusion, this saying has never been truer. So given the significant role that recruiters play in the execution of a DE&I strategy and the fact that the industry is unfortunately shrouded in mistrust, businesses risk having their progress hindered if the agencies they use don't match their own standards. So I thought I'd post a video spelling out the critical role recruiters need to play in the implementation of DE&I strategies and the considerations that organisations will need to make if they want to avoid their initiatives being undermined by unscrupulous agencies. Hi. It's Emilie Gregson here at Signature Career Management, where our passion is placing leading FMCG talent who transform the commercial performance of teams and organisations across the world. So if you're looking to boost your commercial performance of your business, be sure to hit subscribe and click the link in the description below to follow our LinkedIn company page for up-to-date market insight, career advice, recruitment tips and general all-round good content. And don't forget, if you'd like more information surrounding the content in this video, use the link in the description below to download a handy ebook that summarises everything I'll be talking about. But without wasting any more time, let's get on with it. We've seen huge global turbulence over recent years. However, despite lockdowns, inflation and an energy crisis amongst other things, as the dust settles, there's one thing that remains consistent, which is that diversity, equity and inclusion is going to need to be top of businesses' agendas if they want to stay relevant in the years ahead. The problem with this, however, is that DE&I has become prevalent due to deep-rooted and systemic issues. So for businesses who want to counter these, it'll require them to exert significant control over their external as well as internal environments. As recruiters perform a crucial aspect of any organisation's DE&I strategy, given that their role is to bridge the gap between organisational culture and the wider talent marketplace, I thought I'd outline the 3 elements of a DE&I strategy where recruiters and businesses need to collaborate if they want to start making real and lasting change. The challenge that organisations face with a lack of diversity can be largely attributed to affinity bias. This is an umbrella term for a range of largely unconscious biases. For example, race, gender and sexuality, but also some less well-known ones such as class and educational bias. The reason for this favouritism is driven by the fact that our brains can capture 11 million bits of information in a single moment, but can only process approximately 40 at any one time. This means it's become human nature to take unconscious shortcuts to deal with the sheer volume of information. Wanting to surround yourself with people who you have more in common with is an example of one of these shortcuts that we take. However, as has been evident in the lack of diversity in some organisations, this can create gaps. It may not be entirely our fault that unconscious bias has moulded organisational culture though, but it is our collective responsibility to ensure that it doesn't continue to be shaped in that way. Doing what you've always done will simply yield the results that you've always got, especially when the issues are so ingrained. So businesses need to take positive action alongside their external stakeholders to be able to break this cycle. So, given the important role that recruiters play in introducing people to an organisation, they'll need to play a critical part in DE&I strategies. Issues with diversity are prevalent right across society, which is why businesses won't be able to find a solution by themselves. One workaround that you see many businesses try to employ is to introduce quotas, whereby they will stipulate certain characteristics that need to be represented within their organisation. Although tracking the spread of diversity can be useful for determining how successful DE&I strategies are, if it is used in a method of dictating hiring decisions, this can not only impact the quality of these hires made, but also, ironically, be deeply divisive. Awareness is just the first step though, and even if teams are trained to mitigate unconscious bias within an interview process, it's still almost impossible to address these challenges in isolation. Take a middle manager hire, for example. You may have counted unconscious bias throughout your interview and selection processes, but it's difficult to control the input into this system. The talent pools you're fishing from will inevitably be populated with candidates who have benefited from bias at some stage, and this can go as far back as their educational days. This has been allowed to perpetuate through generations without a particular awareness of the impact, because it's being done subconsciously. However, over recent times, awareness of the situation has gained greater and greater exposure. We may only be talking about relatively small margins at each point of contact, but the compound impact at successive stages over successive generations can leave a significant and profound diversity gap, which is evidenced to varying degrees in organisations. So how can businesses improve diverse representation without it impacting the quality of their hires? Well, that is by tapping into cognitive diversity, something that often goes hand in hand with diverse representation, which has also been shown to improve collective business competitiveness. To mitigate the byproduct of generational systemic bias, for example, the advancement of certain groups being suppressed, while simultaneously improving diversity, businesses need to use potential as a major factor behind their future hiring decisions. This should be done at the same time as developing L&D processes across their organisation that enable employees who have been identified to have potential to upskill. This is because potential is the great leveller in talent attraction and selection and helps to bridge any gaps that have resulted from the opportunity cost of compound unconscious bias, which may have hindered the development and advancement of certain demographics. Not only does this help to improve diverse representation and does so in a way that capitalises on cognitive diversity, but also contributes towards more equitable and inclusive environments which start to unpick, rather than perpetuate, the effects of historic bias shaping our workforces. So, what role do recruiters play in this? Well, even the largest of corporations aren't exempt from seeking external support from time to time. So given recruitment partners are the point where the rubber meets the road and are in many cases the first point of contact with talent pools, they often set the tone for the candidate experience. The problem with this is that the recruitment industry has been built on attributes of speed and efficiency, which has been reinforced by the omnipresent commission bonuses that reward consultants for quantity over quality. However, these typical recruitment practices fall well short of the requirements needed by businesses who want to positively influence DE&I within their organisation. Recruitment partners need to be given the time to construct inclusive job adverts that appeal to broader talent pools, something that is rarely afforded by the typical short-term and reactive approach that they are required to take to remain competitive. This is just one small element of it though. To be able to communicate the facets of a business that are appealing to a wider cross-section of society, they first need to develop a partnership with a business that enables them to uncover this, and equally as importantly, they need the time to communicate this into the market effectively, because mail shots and generic adverts fall woefully short at achieving this. That's just the attraction element though. When hiring for attitude and potential, it takes a lot more time to assess these aspects of a candidate than it does if you're just picking out certain elements of a CV or work history to submit a candidate for a role. The time aspect that is required just to attract diverse candidates and assess them for attitude and potential is a significant investment for recruiters. This is at odds with the model that is required to compete in a cutthroat, time-poor recruitment landscape. To effectively address organisational diversity, businesses need to build cohesive and synergistic partnerships with the agency partners that enables them to mitigate affinity bias internally as well as externally when communicating across the talent landscape. Alongside this, they need to build internal learning and development processes that allow them to fast-track talent who possess the right attributes. This needs to be done whilst working closely with an agency partner who recognises these types of candidates in market and can attract them to their client's role with the opportunities that this approach delivers up. The challenge that businesses face with promoting equitable workforces are closely intertwined with the issues that surround the lack of diverse representation, not just throughout the organisational hierarchies, but also across society. As I've mentioned, subconscious bias has the ability to penetrate everyone's judgment when it comes to decision making. So given the skewed representation throughout the higher echelons of organisational structures, It's imperative that businesses take proactive approaches in countering this to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to advance their careers. Considering the sheer volume of touchpoints that occur throughout a candidate's journey, from first considering a role right the way through to exiting a business, it's possible to grasp the level of work that businesses need to undertake to ensure that someone's identity cannot predict the outcome of their success. As with the problems businesses have surrounding diversity, those surrounding equity exist because humans instinctively favour familiarity, so therefore don't always make judgments based on merit alone. To counteract these inherent instincts, it's imperative that businesses exert significant amount of control over the systems that contribute towards the advancement of individuals within their organisation. This requires certain situations to be manufactured where maximum levels of insight and information are available, and similarly other occurrences where it's completely removed. It is the understanding of where data and insight contribute to equitable decision making and where it detracts from it that is a difficult balancing act for businesses, but it is a tightrope that businesses need to learn to walk if they are to promote more equitable workplaces. Take the issue surrounding salaries and the gender pay gap, for example. Often, businesses make salary decisions based on the current wages of a candidate, for example offering a 10% uplift. However, this leads to the perpetuation of existing pay gaps. If salaries were kept confidential and a business was to make an offer based entirely on the perceived worth of a candidate, this would start to readdress imbalances and prevent women from being perennially undervalued. On the flip side of this, take the overall hiring decision, for example. If an interview process was conducted in an informal and ad hoc manner, the resultant impact would be that selections would rely heavily on instinct rather than data-driven decisions. This is a surefire way to allow bias to infiltrate a selection process and prevent equitable opportunity for all applicants. Educating hiring managers with bias training and teaching them to rank potential and attitude as highly as existing skills and experience can prevent certain candidate groups from gaining an advantage. Also, structured interviews and the effective benchmarking process can proliferate data-led hiring and mitigate hires made on gut feel. Ultimately though, hiring and promotion systems need to be developed and controlled to maximise the use of data when necessary to make informed decisions and eradicate certain information from a process that can inevitably hinder someone's potential to advance. Many of the issues that businesses experience surrounding equity of opportunity concern talent attraction, assessment and selection. It's therefore imperative that any external partners who are involved at any stage of a process or contribute towards these aspects of a talent strategy are just as on board with the initiatives as the hiring organisations are. This poses a particular challenge for the traditional recruiter-client relationship, as it requires significant time being invested up front by recruiters, who under normal circumstances are not guaranteed any payment until at the end of the process when and if a candidate is successful. Initiatives such as blinding up CVs or writing candidate profiles that nullify the inherent biases that can infiltrate selection stages are time-consuming tasks. Similarly, undertaking structured interviews to assess attitude and potential are far more arduous than picking out key information about skills and experience from a CV. Even the compilation and delivery of simultaneous shortlists to facilitate effective benchmarking adds extra time constraints. But regardless of this, all of these aspects that are required of equitable hiring practices are virtually impossible to implement in a multi-agency environment, which in effect rules out the vast majority of typical recruitment processes. It is possible to develop the trusting relationships that are required to extend equitable recruitment practices across the entire candidate journey, but in an industry that has for decades inadvertently focused predominantly on speed and efficiency, the recruitment sector is woefully unprepared to cope with the change in emphasis. Inclusion is the thing that binds diversity and equity together, because without it, any results you see in the other areas will likely be short-lived. In truth though, it will be difficult to even start making advancements in other areas if you don't promote an inclusive environment. This can be particularly challenging if cultures have been enabled to flourish that don't foster a broad diversity of thought, as this makes it difficult for those that don't fall into certain cliques to feel comfortable and accepted by the wider organisation. It is important that businesses focus on the things that their employees commonly hold rather than the things that make them different, as this promotes inclusivity. But this needs to be done in a way that doesn't hinder diversity. For example, if a team universally have the values of integrity and accountability, these transcend physical or social differences and so can still be promoted without negatively impacting cognitive diversity. However, if a team is made up of predominantly highly ambitious, career-driven people, it can feel to those that don't fall into that mould that their opinions are less important regardless of any physical or social similarities. Alongside this, it becomes very difficult to gain the variety of perspectives that are needed to support collective decision-making. To establish inclusion in any business, it is important that a variety of people have power, a voice, and ultimately decision-making authority. The challenge that many will face is that if businesses are an exact representation of a cross-section of society that they operate in, it is almost inevitable that certain demographics will have greater representation and subsequently strengthen numbers. It's therefore important that minority groups are empowered so that they feel their voices can be heard and that their opinions are held in equal regard to their compatriots. An important first step for businesses is to link diversity, equity and inclusion to the growth strategy of the business, because teams that recognise these benefits have a greater propensity to adapt. Reinforce this commitment through the development of internal policies and ensure that all groups are represented by developing an employer value proposition that is attractive to a wide spectrum of individuals. Initiatives such as flexible working, parental leave or internships for underrepresented groups are all beneficial propositions, but the answer to developing an inclusive EVP doesn't solely lie in a top-down approach. Many of the answers will come from the people already in your organisation, so feedback and communication should be an integral part of developing your EVP. Ask your team members the question: what do they like about your company? What don't they like? What would they change? How would they change it? A whole series of initiatives can be thought out and initiated throughout all aspects of a business, so that any advancements in diversity and equity are fully ingrained into the daily practices of work life. Promoting inclusion is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and the extra work that could be put in to develop a holistic solution in itself promotes inclusion. However, it's also important to consider the motto, do what you say and say what you do, because communication is everything when it comes to inclusion, as it demonstrates to everyone within a business how important it is that all opinions are represented. As discussed, transparency is key in promoting inclusion, and considering the role that recruiters play, given that they are often the first point of contact in a candidate journey, it's imperative that they are fully aware of all the client's inclusion initiatives, but can also proficiently communicate them into the market. It takes a highly detailed approach to communicate an employer brand into the candidate marketplace. Firstly, it requires time and effort to delve into and fully understand the elements of an employer value proposition that will appeal to a full spectrum of candidates. The speedy and efficient approach that is systemic of typical recruitment practices relies heavily on the big ticket items such as salary packages and benefits, job titles, progression opportunities and office locations. Whereas the elements of an EVP that are important to promote inclusion are often at the other end of the scale. As they say, it's the thought that counts, and these aspects aren't always deemed as important by recruiters looking for mass market appeal that generates a quicker turnover of jobs. This hinders real change occurring regardless of the efforts that businesses have made towards promoting an inclusive environment. Secondly, there are important considerations that recruiters need to make regarding their market approach. The language and placement of job ads can have serious repercussions to an inclusive approach. Special measures need to be taken to ensure that the full breadth of a talent pool is approached about opportunities. However, this is again time-consuming and typically shunned by recruiters looking to maximise their return. Yet again, businesses looking to improve DE&I will need to invest in their recruitment partners if they want to make real advancement. However, as has been outlined in this video, if they get this right, the benefits will massively outweigh the costs. So there's my guide on the critical role that recruiters have to play in promoting diversity, equity and inclusion in businesses. That's my longest video to date, but in truth I've only just started to scratch the surface on this topic, and if there's one piece of advice that I'd give if you're only just starting to consider driving positive change, is that there is no time like the present for getting started, because the longer you wait, the further you'll be falling behind your peers and the more you'll have to unpick when you finally get going. Like I mentioned at the start of this video, if you look in the description below, you'll find a handy ebook that recaps the topics I've talked about. But if you'd like to chat to me in more detail or are looking for support in implementing your own DE&I strategy, please don't hesitate to get in touch.